Hi, good evening. My name is Alice Torres, and this is my very first podcast and presentation of why Made in China is becoming Made in Mexico. Let's dive into that phenomenon. The reason why, or the main factors driving this phenomenon of China moving to Mexico is first, let's go back for a little bit. There's been some history, very negative history between the US and China trade wars up until the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. The trade wars were pretty nasty. Um, Post pandemic, or even during the pandemic, uh, the disruption of Chinese industry and the U.S. imports of Chinese goods jammed the ports all around the world. Factories in the U.S. suffered shortages of products and parts made in China. Many are now demanding their suppliers to set up in America or risk losing businesses. That didn't happen. In 2021, Chinese companies were responsible for 30% of foreign investment, only second to the US, which was at a rate of 47%. China is a country that develops things very fast, at a very fast pace. Um, and this is one of the reasons, another reason why China decided to set up shop in Mexico. Logistically, Mexico doesn't require a lot of planning. It's easy, it's easily accessible. Um, Quality, Mexico is known for having a very diverse and highly skilled workforce, many of whom are bilingual. Products can be returned to be repaired or replaced very fast in Mexico. Um, there is labor costs. Direct labor in Mexico is 70% less expensive than it is anywhere else in the world, including the U.S. Mexico manufacturing labor costs are 20% lower than China. The exchange rate between the dollar and the yuan and the pesos also contributed to this change. Trade agreements. Uh, Mexico has very loose trade agreements versus the U.S. Overhead and transportation costs are at a minimum. Also, more importantly, intellectual properties. Mexico has a strong reputation of protecting its intellectual rights versus China, has lackluster enforcement when it comes to intellectual properties, which is, again, advantageous of China moving to Mexico. The Manhua Holding is an investment company that was founded in 1992 and its headquarters in the Republic of China and has many subsidiaries and branches associated with the company to include there's companies in the US, Canada, UK, Singapore. They all specialize in manufacturing and trading of sofas and other furniture. That's Manhua Holdings. They specialize in manufacturing and trading of sofas and other furniture and distribute those furnishings to uh, our companies like Wayfair, IKEA, and other companies that are based here in the United States. What are the main challenges of the Chinese companies setting up shops in the U.S. versus Mexico? Well, the challenges began when President Trump came into office in 2017. He demanded that American companies abandon China. By 2018, Trump was slapping stiff tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese imports. And under the North American Trade Agreement, manufacturers were forced to employ minimum percentages of parts and raw materials from within the region to qualify for duty-free access to our country, by diverting the trade tariffs that Trump had imposed. The Manhua Company had already responded to the tariffs by building a factory in Vietnam and using it to make products for the U.S. market. But the soaring prices of shipping staggered this strategy, which then Manhua, in response, was forced to move the shipping containers, 35-foot, 40-foot shipping containers to the Pacific or across the Pacific from Vietnam. So voyages that previously cost $2,000 were suddenly 10 times as much to ship to the U.S. So to circumvent the issue, Manhua Company, the Chinese companies decided, let's think about moving to Mexico. Mexico is bordered on several of the United States, to include like New Mexico and Texas, even Louisiana. I mean, Texas borders a lot of our states. So, of course, the light bulb came on with these Chinese companies that, hey, let's set up shop in Mexico. The only thing that they were concerned about were stereotypical things that we all think about, like the violence due to the drug trafficking and drug cartels that control much of Mexico. So in order to combat their stereotypes and all the negative things that they heard about Mexico, they decided to move there, develop personal relationships with the governor of Nuevo Leon, Governor Samuel Garcia, who approved of the Chinese companies moving to Mexico in Nuevo Leon. Also, the unemployment rate there was 3.6% prior to Manhua Company setting up shop. So this surge of enormous investment set off a fierce competition for workers to come in and to be employed there. So savvy managers wooed their employees with extras like 5-course meals, 5-star quality meals and transportation to and from work, setting up housing in apartments for their employees to move there and to work at the Manhua companies. So just to combat all these, the challenges that China had with the U.S. as far as setting up, shops here, they set up shop in Mexico to, overt the battles of import duties and tariffs and the struggles between the U.S. and China that impacted, relations and business between the two companies. Will China remain a dominant manufacturer in the world economy? Absolutely, yes. China, with its now 1.4 billion people, essentially has a limitless supply of workers eager for factory jobs, streaming in from the countryside, unbeatable combination of investment into ports and infrastructure by the government and the build-up of the supply chain. You could get everything in China to make just about any product you can imagine from top to bottom. With China moving to Mexico, it's even more of a bigger picture economically speaking and as far as business speaking. You can imagine that China, has the world by its strings. As far as developing products and manufacturing products, ensuring quality and all of that. So China has just capitalized on the Mexican market, simply put. China has no intentions of forsaking our American economy, still the largest on the earth. I mean, come on. I mean, we are the ones that are buying the most made in China, soon to be made in Mexico products. And that leads me into globalization. In my humble opinion, I mean, globalization is a gumbo of interactions and integrations between different nations and cultures and companies. And it also speeds up the movement and exchanges of goods and services, capital, technologies, cultural practices all over the planet. The effects of globalization promotes and increases interactions, and all in a positive way. Examples of globalization from chapter 1 of our book. Um, wow, between 1960 and 2020, the value of world economy increased 9 times the value. I mean, while the value of international goods increased 19.7 times. Trade in goods and services and the value of foreign direct investment have been growing faster than world output. More firms are dispersing products or productions, processes to different locations around the globe has increased 300%. Economies of the world's nations, states are becoming more intertwined. World has become significantly wealthier in the past 2 decades. The U.S. accounted for 38.3% of the world output. In 2020, U.S. accounted for 24.7% of world output. The economic growth between these economies of China and others have been threefold. So there is no stopping the globalization of China and the globalization of the U.S. and the other countries. I think that it will continue with the merge of Mexico and China, the emergence of goods and services, and the output or exporting of those goods and services via Mexico will continue. Um, I think that it's just the only beginning. I mean, China is cracking the economies of different countries, and they are becoming a force to be reckoned with. So we must keep an eye on them in our future. That ends my podcast, and I thank you for listening. I hope you have a great evening. Thank you. Bye bye.